Hey everybody, welcome to the second video in our installment of how we plan on saving the world. It's going to be a juicy video, but stay tuned because today we are talking about defeating capitalism with capitalism. You know, more often than not, when you look at how people try to make a difference in our economy, in our world, they think about the frustrations they have and they start to get engaged politically. They start to become activists and advocate for policies and particular candidates in order to try to affect change in the world. And while that is all good and well, if you know anything about the content I've been producing and my position on this matter, you know that I believe the free market operates in a way quicker fashion and represents a way higher potential for affecting positive change. And so, you know, when I'm thinking about how to frame the plan here, the first thing I want to do is I want to anchor in the end game. You know, we're talking about what is the final conclusion of what an economy that works for everybody looks like. And so, first and foremost, I want to put an emphasis and really draw a line and create a dichotomy on living in a world where all of our businesses are owned by individuals or small groups of individuals. And I want to contrast that with a world where companies are not owned by one person or 10 people and therefore having like 1,000 employees, but rather companies are owned by the employees, which might represent tens or hundreds or even thousands of people, as well as owned by the consumers, definitely representing thousands and thousands of people. In addition to that, there will be investment required to get these companies off the ground, but there will be a new relationship with how investors get a return and the extent to which the company operates only for their interests. That is the big, splitting point here. When we're talking about what's going wrong with our economy, we're talking about an economy that's been designed to create haves and have-nots. And in that sense, we have to redesign the economy, make sure that it prioritizes what I call creating social value. And so to that extent, what I want to paint the picture of is a world where every single business that you buy from is owned by a multiplicity of community members so that the businesses are therefore accountable to the community, but more than that, that they exist for the sake of the community. That is a completely different logic for why business exists than it does today. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about overhauling capitalism and defeating capitalism with capitalism. We're talking about still commerce, free market exchanges, entrepreneurship, and all the stuff we love about capitalism. But we're talking about changing the why and the heart and the soul of business so that business produces outcomes that are fair and just and equitable across the board. And in a time where you have so much inequality, we're talking about tons of suffering that can be alleviated if only the people who had shared more. That's the recipe, and that's how we do it. Now, once again, in the political landscape of things, typically that involves a form of taxation, a form of mandate, no choice in the matter. And so when we're talking about taxing the rich and doing all these things, what we really need to talk about isn't taxing the rich. It's saying, how do the rich become rich? How is wealth concentrated in our society? And then to tweak the engineering of these systems that concentrate wealth, which is business, so that the profits and the surplus aren't just hoarded in the hands of a few people, but they're spread and shared so there's not needless suffering in the world. And so what I want to highlight in the way that this change takes place, since it's not mandated, it actually happens through the free market. It happens through competition. And the best way to kind of lay out why this business model is super competitive is when you look at how companies succeed, what makes them succeed. And when you're building a brand like FruitCraft, like Coca-Cola, like whatever brand, you're fundamentally looking to acquire customers. And then it's more than just acquiring them for a one-time try or a taste. If you can retain them, potentially for the rest of their lives because they're an advocate of your brand, they like the flavor of it, et cetera, then you've created a business system and a business model that is something that has sustainability and longevity and really growth on the horizon. Because then you take that one customer, you add a second, you add a third, you add 10, you add 100, and they're still with you for their entire life, but they're you're adding to that number. And so this is a phenomenally important aspect of being hyper competitive, because what we're talking about here is creating a new value proposition so that consumers, when they go buy your wine, your cider, your mead, whatever product you might produce in the marketplace, they're not just going based on it being tasty, which of course our products are delicious and tasty. But even if a competitor came out with an equally delicious product, and even if it was a little bit cheaper, we have a model here for business where a consumer says, you know what, the reason why I buy from FruitCraft isn't just because of the tasty stuff. It's also because I know that when I spend my money with them, it goes to create the type of world that I want to live in. What does that do? It retains your customer base. And for me, this is the number one thing all investors are looking for. When you're talking about what investors want, they want growth. How do you measure growth? It's really based on customer acquisition, customer retention, and the trajectory of a brand or a company. And so we are talking about a domino effect here. If we can win customers to the School of Social Value and into taking the social value pledge, and they can open up their wallet and say, yes, I spend $45 on wine every month, but I also spend $70 going out, I spend this much money, and you look at all the money that you spend as a consumer and you say, you know what, I want to take all of this and I want to try to put it into companies that are doing good things. Well, that gives you a competitive advantage in the new world that we're seeing, in an economy that is being disrupted from a generational change, as those of us who, grew up watching 3 channels and, Clorox and Cox and cereal and all the advertising and commercials we got, now we realize that it wasn't just based on the tastiness, it's based on the business model itself. We have now elevated our consumption to that level. And as we consumers do that, investors are going to follow suit because they want to see return on investment, and that is where a lot of the growth in our economy is going to go, as I see consumers transitioning to buying consciously with their values. But more than that, think about employees. If we create a system here where employees have a path to ownership and there's a real meritocracy at place where what they put out into the company, they get back in some profit sharing return. We're going to be sharing 10% of our profits with employees. You have another ripe recipe for not only acquisition of great and talented people to join your team, but you also have a recipe for retention. And not only is it that they're sharing in the upside and they have ownership stake, but back to all of the extra value they bring to the organization is designed to be shared with our community, with the world, to make the world a better place. That is going to make someone feel good about clocking in, and it's going to make them want to stay at the company that you have created there. So all these things are a ripe recipe for a vibrant company to outcompete all of its competitors in many senses as an inevitability. Here, when I'm making this video, we are in the kind of the heart of the coronavirus crisis. If you're watching this video after that crisis, I hope it was short-lived. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at what happens with this virus, there's nothing that can stop it because we don't have the antibodies, we don't have the vaccines, we haven't done that research yet. Well, in many senses, there's nothing any competing business can do when a social value enterprise enters their industry and enters their market. They're going to be losing customers because customers are going to say, you know what, these people bring the same products to market, but they bring more value in other ways that are really important for me. And so it will slowly but surely, or quickly but surely, depending on the rate at which we adopt these new agreements, can affect the change we're talking about. So, in an effort to make you completely understand what it is I'm sharing and the plan here, I want to, once again, start from reverse engineering our goal. If our goal is to have thousands and thousands of community-owned enterprises that are competing in the marketplace to take away market share from companies that are concentrating wealth instead of sharing wealth, then how do we get there? Well, we don't get there necessarily by the government saying, hey, all public companies share 40% of your stocks and your decision-making with your labor force. That is likely not going to happen. That's untenable for most businesses, and they're not going to just give up nilly-willy. But we can take away their customers. We can take away their employees. We can take away their investors because we're creating a better solution to those things. And so when we talk about the kind of stages to get there, in the next video, you're essentially going to see the roadmap of the School of Social Value's first concept that, when properly reaching critical mass, has the power to fuel this entire movement and to make the difference we're talking. So pay attention to the next video, and as always, remember to do good and to share with others. Cheers.